The crash the navigation console screamed its warnings too late. Cassidy Hayes barely had time to grip her harness before the cargo hauler Meridian tore through Cathera's atmosphere like a meteor wrapped in flame. The ship bucked and twisted, throwing her against the restraints hard enough to crack ribs. Through the viewport, she watched the cockpit section rip away, taking Captain Torres and half the crew compartment with it into the green hell below. Then everything went black. When Cassidy opened her eyes, pain arrived first. Sharp, stabbing agony in her chest with every breath. Her left arm hung wrong, numb below the elbow. Blood ran warm down her face from somewhere in her hairline. She was still strapped into her jump seat, but the seat was no longer attached to anything recognizable as a ship. Twisted metal surrounded her like the ribs of a massive corpse. Smoke curled through shattered panels, carrying the acrid stench of burning plastic and fried circuits. She fumbled with the harness release, fingers clumsy and shaking. The buckle finally gave way and she tumbled forward onto her hands and knees. Glass crunched beneath her palms. Every movement brought fresh waves of nausea and pain that made white spots dance across her vision. "Captain?" Her voice came out as a raspy whisper. She tried again, louder. "Captain Torres, anyone?" Silence answered. Not even the hum of backup systems. The ship was dead, and she was probably the only one who wasn't. Cassidy forced herself upright, using a bent support beam for balance. Through the gap where the hull had peeled away like synthetic skin, she could see Cathara for the first time in daylight. The jungle stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of purple and violet vegetation beneath a sky the color of old bruises. Twin suns hung at different angles, one amber and one pale yellow, casting strange doubled shadows across everything. The ship had carved a burning scar through the forest, leaving a trail of destruction and debris scattered across maybe 200 meters. Cassidy could see other sections of the meridian jutting from the alien trees like grave markers. No signs of movement. No signs of life. She needed water, medical supplies, anything. Her emergency training kicked in despite the fog of shock and pain. Check for survivors first, secure the area, assess available resources, activate the distress beacon. Standard protocol for a crash landing on an uncharted world. Except Cathera wasn't supposed to be uncharted. The star charts had marked it as uninhabited but surveyed. Class 7 vegetation with no significant fauna. Someone had made a terrible mistake. Cassidy climbed through the wreckage, calling out names she wasn't sure anyone would answer. The cargo bay had split open, spilling containers across the purple jungle floor. She found Torres 15 meters from what used to be the cockpit, still strapped into his chair. She didn't check for a pulse. No one survived that kind of impact. The emergency locker had survived mostly intact, jammed between two bulkheads. She pried it open and nearly sobbed with relief. Water pouches, medical kit, thermal blanket, flares, and most important, the personal distress beacon. She activated it immediately, watching the indicator light pulse steady and green. Signal broadcasting. Help would come. She just had to survive until it arrived. The medical kit contained dermal sealant for the gash on her head and pain inhibitors that took the edge off her ribs. The arm worried her more. Definitely broken, maybe worse. She fashioned a crude sling from part of the thermal blanket and tried not to think about infection or internal bleeding or any of the 100 other things that could kill her before rescue arrived. By the time the first sun started to set, Cassidy had established a rough camp in the most intact section of the wreckage. She'd found more water and some emergency rations, enough for maybe a week if she was careful. The nights on Cathara were going to be dark. Both suns set within an hour of each other, and she had no idea if there was a moon. She was trying to start a small fire using pieces of debris when she first felt it. The sensation of being watched. The hair on her neck stood up, every animal instinct in her brain suddenly screaming danger. Cassidy turned slowly. It stood at the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the fading light. Massive, easily 3 meters tall at the shoulder, 6 legs, each ending in claws that looked designed for tearing through metal, never mind flesh. Its body was covered in overlapping plates that gleamed like dark crystal, and along its spine ran a ridge of translucent spikes that caught the dying sunlight and fractured it into rainbow shards. The head was broad and flat with no visible eyes she could see, but a mouth that split almost the entire width of its skull. Cassidy's breath stopped. Her hand moved instinctively toward the flare gun tucked into her belt, but she knew it wouldn't matter. This thing was an apex predator. She was injured, alone, and completely helpless. The creature took a step forward and another. Its movement was fluid, almost graceful despite its size. Cassidy could hear its breathing now, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. She should run. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The creature circled her slowly, its massive head lowering until she could feel heat radiating from its body. She could smell it now. Something sharp and mineral like ozone after lightning strikes. This close, she could see that the crystalline spikes along its back pulsed with faint bioluminescence, cycling through deep purples and blues. It should kill her. She could see the intelligence in the way it moved, the calculation. It knew exactly what she was. Prey. Weak. Easy. The creature opened its mouth, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that caught the last rays of sunlight. Cassidy closed her eyes, waiting for the end, but it never came. When she opened her eyes again, the creature had stepped back. It settled onto its haunches, those massive claws scraping furrows in the purple earth, and it simply watched her. Cassidy stared back, her heart hammering so hard she thought her broken ribs might finally punch through skin. The creature made a sound, low and resonant, that vibrated through her chest. Not a growl. Something else. Almost questioning. Then it turned and disappeared into the darkening jungle, silent as smoke despite its enormous size. Cassidy stood alone in the wreckage, trembling, trying to understand what had just happened. The fire she'd been building had gone out. The night was falling fast, and somewhere in the alien darkness something impossible had just chosen not to kill her. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't, because every hour, like clockwork, she heard it circling her camp, the soft scrape of crystal claws on stone, the rumble of breathing that wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite anything else she could name. The creature she would come to call Rook was standing guard, and Cassidy had no idea why. The Bond morning on Cathara arrived with humid heat and the screech of something flying overhead that sounded like tearing metal. Cassidy jerked awake from the half-sleep she'd finally fallen into, her broken arm throbbing despite the pain inhibitors. The fire had died to cold ash hours ago. Rook sat 20 meters away, perfectly still, his crystalline spikes catching the amber light of the first sunrise. He'd been there all night, protecting her from what she didn't know, but the circle of disturbed earth around her camp told its own story. Other things had come close. None had gotten through. "Good morning," Cassidy said, her voice hoarse. It felt absurd talking to the creature, but the silence was worse. "Thank you for not eating me." Rook's head tilted fractionally. The spikes along his back flared brighter for a moment, pulsing blue-green. Then he rose and melted into the jungle without a sound. Cassidy spent the morning inventorying her supplies and trying to make the camp more secure. Her ribs screamed with every movement, and the broken arm was useless dead weight. She managed to rig a crude shelter using part of the ship's hull and some cargo netting, creating a space that would at least keep the rain off if the clouds building on the horizon meant what she thought they did. Rook returned at midday, dragging something that looked like a cross between a boar and a lizard. The creature was freshly killed, its purple blood still steaming in the heat. He dropped it 3 meters from her shelter and backed away, watching. Cassidy stared at the offering, then at Rook. "You brought me food." The crystalline spikes rippled with color. She was starting to think they might be how he communicated. The medical scanner in the emergency kit confirmed the creature's meat was protein compatible, if slightly toxic. Cooking would break down the compounds. She'd eaten worse during survival training. By the time she'd butchered what she could with her one good arm and cooked it over a fire, Rook had settled into his watching position again. Cassidy ate in silence, aware of his attention on every movement. When she finished, she pushed a portion of the cooked meat toward him. "Fair's fair," she said. Rook's mouth opened in that disturbing split-skull grin, but he didn't move toward the food. After several minutes, Cassidy realized he wasn't going to. Maybe he only ate fresh kills. Maybe cooked meat was offensive to him. Maybe a dozen other reasons she couldn't guess. The days fell into a pattern. Rook would disappear for hours, returning with food or to circle the camp. Cassidy worked on fortifying her shelter and keeping the distress beacon charged. Her ribs were healing slowly, the pain manageable. The arm was another story. She was pretty sure nerve damage had set in, and without proper medical care, it might never fully recover. On the 5th day, they came. Cassidy heard them first, other creatures crashing through the jungle. Not Rook's measured silence, but loud and aggressive. She grabbed the flare gun and backed toward her shelter as 3 shapes emerged from the purple vegetation. They were Rook's species, but different. Smaller maybe, with spikes that burned angry red instead of his calm blues and purples. They spread out, surrounding her camp, their movements coordinated like pack hunters. One of them was larger than the others, covered in scars where crystal plating had been torn and regrown in jagged patterns. That one, Cassidy would later learn to call Thane. Thane's mouth opened and a sound came out that was nothing like Rook's questioning rumble. This was pure predatory intent. Cassidy raised the flare gun with her good arm, knowing it was pointless. 3 against 1 and she was already injured. The attack came fast. Thane lunged, claws extended. Cassidy fired the flare gun directly into his face, and he reeled back with a sound like shattering glass. But the other two kept coming. Then Rook hit them like a meteor. He came from nowhere, slamming into the first attacker with enough force to send them both tumbling through the wreckage. His spikes blazed brilliant white, brighter than Cassidy had ever seen. The sound he made froze her blood, a roar that seemed to shake the very air. The second attacker tried to flank him, but Rook was faster. He caught it by the throat with his massive jaws and threw it bodily into the jungle. Thane recovered and charged, and suddenly Cassidy was watching something that wasn't a fight, but a war. They moved too fast for her to follow completely. A blur of crystal and fury. Rook fought with a savage intensity that terrified her. This wasn't the careful, measured creature who brought her food and watched over her sleep. This was something primal and unstoppable. When it ended, Thane and his companions retreated into the jungle, bloodied and beaten. Rook stood between Cassidy and the tree line, every spike on his body blazing with warning light. The message was clear: she was under his protection and he would kill to enforce it. Rook, Cassidy whispered. She'd started calling him that because of how he moved, patient and strategic like the chess piece. You saved my life. He turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw it. Intelligence. Not animal cunning, but actual, profound intelligence. He understood. Maybe not her words, but her meaning. Cassidy took a step forward, then another, her hand extended, trembling. Thank you. Rook lowered his massive head, and she touched the crystalline spike nearest her. It was warm, humming with some kind of energy she could feel through her palm. The colors shifted, cycling through blues and soft greens. Peaceful colors. They stayed like that for a long moment, girl and monster, connected by something neither could name. The rescue ship arrived on the 8th day. Cassidy saw it first, a bright streak across the purple sky. Her distress beacon had worked. They'd found her. She should have felt relief, joy, anything positive. Instead, she felt her stomach drop. Rook had disappeared into the jungle when the ship's engines grew loud. By the time the rescue team landed in the clearing, Cassidy was alone in her camp, looking very much like a traumatized survivor. The team leader was a woman named Juniper Park, though she insisted everyone call her June. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and gentle hands, a biologist according to her uniform patches. She examined Cassidy's injuries while 2 others secured the area, and a 4th uploaded data from the crash site. You're incredibly lucky, June said, setting Cassidy's arm properly for the first time in over a week. The relief was immediate. Cathera was supposed to be uninhabited. The survey team missed something big. How big? Cassidy asked. We've detected massive life signs all over this region. Apex predators, probably. The kind that should have eaten you 3 times over by now. June paused, studying Cassidy's face. How did you survive out here alone? Cassidy hesitated. She could feel Rook somewhere in the jungle watching, always watching. I stayed in the wreckage. Kept quiet. Got lucky, I guess. June didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. We'll have you off this rock in an hour. There's a medical frigate in orbit. They'll fix that arm properly and check for any parasites or toxins. An hour. 60 minutes, and she'd never see Rook again. The thought hurt more than it should. He was a creature, an alien predator from a world humans had no right being on, but he'd protected her, fed her, chosen her for reasons she still didn't understand. As the rescue team packed up their equipment, June walked the perimeter of Cassidy's camp. She stopped suddenly, crouching to examine the ground. When she looked up, her expression had changed completely. Cassidy, June said slowly, these tracks, these are fresh. And they circle your camp like something was standing guard. Before Cassidy could answer, one of the other team members shouted a warning. Rook emerged from the jungle, moving with that fluid grace that belied his size. The rescue team went for their weapons immediately, but June held up a hand. Nobody shoot. Just watch. Rook approached slowly, ignoring the armed humans completely. He moved straight to Cassidy, settling beside her with those massive claws mere centimeters from where she stood. His spikes pulsed blue-green, calm and steady. Cassidy reached out and touched his shoulder plating. "It's okay," she said softly. "They're here to help." June's eyes were wide, her tablet out and recording. "This is impossible," she breathed. "Xenofauna don't bond with humans. They can't. The biochemistry is completely incompatible. There's no evolutionary basis for this kind of behavior." "Well," Cassidy said, watching Rook's colors shift and swirl. "I guess nobody told him that." The choice, the rescue ship Persephone, hung in orbit above Cathara like a steel promise of safety. But Cassidy stood in the loading bay of the shuttle, unable to make her feet cross that final threshold. Behind her, through the open bay doors, she could see Rook. He'd followed them back to the landing site, keeping his distance from the rescue team but never letting Cassidy out of his sight. "We need to leave," June said gently. She'd been patient for the last 30 minutes, but the window for orbital insertion was closing. "Cassidy, whatever you think you feel for that creature, it's just trauma bonding. Once you're back in proper medical care with counseling, you'll understand." "He saved my life," Cassidy said. "Multiple times, I know. And I'm documenting everything for the xenobiology reports. This is an incredible discovery. But he's still a predator on an alien world, and you're still human. You can't stay here." Cassidy knew June was right. Logically, rationally, staying on Cathara was suicide. Her arm needed proper treatment. Her ribs were still healing badly. She had a life back in human space, family who thought she was dead, a future that didn't involve living in a crashed ship and eating alien lizard meat. But when she looked at Rook, she saw something else, a choice he'd made that defied his nature. Protection offered for no evolutionary reason. Something that looked almost like friendship, if she could call it that, across the vast gulf between species. The decision was taken from her hands by the arrival of the second ship. It dropped from orbit like a hammer, military fast and aggressive. The shuttle that deployed was twice the size of the rescue team's craft, bristling with weapons and armor. Soldiers poured out in combat gear, spreading out with military precision. Leading them was a man June clearly recognized and didn't like. Director Wolf, according to the name stenciled on his tactical vest. He was maybe 50, with cold eyes and the bearing of someone used to giving orders and watching them followed without question. "Dr. Park," Wolf said, barely glancing at June. His attention was locked on Rook. "Step away from the xenofauna. We're taking it into custody for study." "Custody?" June's voice went sharp. "Director, this creature hasn't shown any aggression toward the rescue team. In fact, the behavioral data suggests an unprecedented level of intelligence and selective bonding behavior, which is exactly why we need it for study." Wolf gestured, and soldiers moved forward with equipment Cassidy recognized from her training. Stun nets, tranquilizer cannons, reinforced containment fields, military capture gear. This could be the breakthrough we need to understand xenofauna psychology. Think of what we could learn. Rook had gone very still. His spikes had shifted to deep crimson. The color Cassidy had learned meant danger. He could sense the threat even if he couldn't understand the words. "You'll kill him," Cassidy said, taking him off Cathara, putting him in a lab somewhere. "He'll die." Wolf finally looked at her properly. "You're Hayes, the crash survivor. You've been through trauma. Let the professionals handle this. I've spent 8 days with him. I've seen what he's capable of, how he thinks. He's not an animal you can just cage up for study. Everything can be caged, Miss Hayes. It's just a matter of using the right cage." Wolf nodded to his team. "Tranquilize it. Watch for the spikes, they might be venomous." The first soldier raised a tranquilizer cannon. Rook's head swung toward the threat, and the sound that came from him made everyone freeze. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was a frequency that seemed to bypass ears entirely and hit directly into the brain stem, triggering every prey response humans had. 3 more of Rook's species emerged from the jungle. Then 5 more. Then a dozen. They surrounded the landing site in a loose circle, all with spikes burning aggressive red. Thane was among them, his scarred plating catching the double sunlight. "Director," one of the soldiers said, her voice tight, "we've got multiple hostiles. Recommend immediate extraction. Wolf's jaw clenched. We came here for a specimen. We're leaving with one. You're going to start a war, June said. Look at them. They're organized. They're communicating. This isn't animal pack behavior. This is tactical positioning. Cassidy understood with sudden clarity what was happening. Rook hadn't been alone in protecting her. His entire species had been watching, learning, making their own choices about humans. And right now their choice was clear. Leave or face all of them together. Stand down, Cassidy said. She walked past Wolf, past the soldiers with their weapons raised, straight toward Rook. Behind her, she heard June calling her name, warning her back. But she didn't stop. Rook watched her approach, his colors shifting uncertainly between red aggression and blue calm. Cassidy stopped an arm's length away, looking up at the massive creature who'd somehow decided she was worth protecting. I have to go, she said softly. Not because of them. Because I'm human and this isn't my world. I'll die here eventually and you know it. The colors cycled faster now, confused patterns she'd never seen before. Rook took a step forward, lowering his head until they were level. She could feel the heat radiating from his spikes, see her reflection in the crystalline plates of his armor. But I won't forget you, Cassidy continued, and I won't let them cage you. I promise. She reached out with both hands, the newly healed arm still weak but functional, and touched the sides of his massive head. For a moment there was just the two of them, connected across impossible distances of evolution and understanding. Then Rook made a sound, soft and low. The other creatures began backing into the jungle, disappearing as silently as they'd come. Thane was the last to go, watching Cassidy with what might have been respect or might have been something else entirely. Rook stepped back. His spikes flashed through every color in rapid succession, a display Cassidy somehow knew was goodbye. Then he turned and walked into the jungle, and the purple vegetation swallowed him whole. Cassidy stood alone in the clearing, tears running down her face that she didn't bother to hide. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, June said, appearing at her shoulder. Possibly both. He understood, Cassidy said. Did you see that? He understood what I was saying. I saw. June's voice was quiet. I recorded it all. The bonding behavior, the pack dynamics, the apparent emotional response. Cassidy, this is going to change everything we know about xenofauna. Wolf approached, his expression thunderous. You just cost us an unprecedented research opportunity. She just prevented a massacre, June countered. Those creatures were ready to fight, Director. You saw the defensive formation. We'd have lost people, and for what? A specimen that would die in captivity anyway? Dr. Park is right, said a new voice. Pilot Reeves, the rescue shuttle commander, stood by the boarding ramp. I've been reviewing the combat projections. If those creatures had attacked simultaneously, our survival probability drops below 20%. Miss Hayes de-escalated a lethal situation. Wolf glared at all of them but seemed to realize he was outvoted. Fine, but Cathara is being marked for xenofauna study. We'll be back with proper containment. You do that, Cassidy said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. And when you come back, I'll be here too. As a consultant, making sure whatever studies happen are ethical and non-harmful. Dr. Park can arrange it, can't you? June's smile was fierce. Absolutely. The Xenobiology Institute will want you on staff immediately. First-hand behavioral data from an unprecedented human-xenofauna interaction. You'll be writing papers for the next decade. On the flight up to the Persephone, Cassidy pressed her hand against the viewport and watched Cathara shrink below. Somewhere down there, Rook was returning to his life. To whatever purpose drove his species. She wondered if he would remember her, or if she'd just been a strange anomaly in his existence. June sat beside her, tablet out and already drafting reports. For what it's worth, the biologist said, I think he'll remember. The way he responded to you, the protection behavior, the emotional display at the end. That's not instinct. That's choice. What made him choose me? Cassidy asked. Out of all the prey creatures on that planet, why protect a human? Maybe that's the wrong question. June looked up from her tablet. Maybe it's not why he chose you, but what he saw in you that made him think you were worth choosing. Intelligence recognizes intelligence, Cassidy, even across species. 3 months later, Cassidy returned to Cathara as part of an official xenobiology research team. They established a base camp far from her original crash site. using non-invasive monitoring and observation protocols that she and June had fought tooth and nail to implement. On her second day back, Rook found her. He emerged from the jungle at dawn, spikes pulsing blue-green welcome. Older somehow, with new scars on his plating, but unmistakably him. Cassidy walked out to meet him alone, against protocol but beyond caring. They stood together in the purple morning light, human and creature. Proof that connection could exist in the strangest places. Rook's colors cycled through patterns she was learning to read. Recognition, satisfaction, something that might have been the xenofauna equivalent of happiness. "I came back," Cassidy said. "I promised I wouldn't forget." The crystalline spikes flared bright, and somewhere in her heart Cassidy knew he understood. Not the words, perhaps, but the meaning behind them. That some bonds transcend species and survival instinct. That choice matters, even for creatures humans barely understood. That a lost human girl and a deadly alien beast had looked at each other across the impossible distance between their worlds and decided, together, that some things were worth protecting, even each other.